Anna Edwards thought my corner lawn was just decoration on her racetrack. To her, my $3,000 retirement grass in Maple Ridge Estates was a shortcut, not private property. Every morning at 7:47, her luxury SUV carved fresh scars across the one patch of green my wife Laura could still enjoy while her body slowly betrayed her. I asked politely. She laughed. I put up signs. She ran them over. I called the police. She flashed her HOA title and told me I'd better learn how things work around here. What Anna didn't know was that I'd spent 30 years as an electrician building foundations and concrete bases that outlived the people who signed the checks. And one late night, hunched over old county maps, I discovered something beautiful. The ground she was tearing up didn't belong to the HOA queen at all. It belonged to me. Before we dive into how a single concrete post shattered her car, her power, and her little empire, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the payoff at the Pasas. End of this story. I wasn't just any retiree with a lawn obsession. I'd spent 30 years wiring up hospitals, airports, and data centers, places where precision meant lives didn't end in smoke. I'd poured concrete around more utility poles than Anna Edwards had poured Chardonnay. When I bought the corner lot in Maple Ridge Estates, I wanted one thing: peace. My wife Laura was fighting early-stage Parkinson's. She couldn't garden like before, couldn't drive far, but she could sit by the window and watch the sprinklers hiss across the emerald green lawn we built together. That patch of earth was our sanctuary until Anna came roaring in. Her husband Greg owned Edwards Development, the construction company that built half the neighborhood. Their McMansion sat like a palace, overlooking everyone else with fake stone lions, a fountain that never worked, and enough HOA power to make city inspectors tremble. And Anna loved reminding everyone of that power. The first day, I found tire tracks carved through the new sod. The second, the irrigation line was shredded. The third, the sound of her white BMW's tires became part of my morning routine, followed by the hiss of my dying sprinklers. I installed a small sign: private property, no vehicles. She crushed it flat. When I walked over to talk, she didn't even turn from her flower beds. Mrs. Edwards, I began polite as could be, you've been cutting across my corner. It's a public easement, she snapped. Maybe don't plant so close to the road if you can't handle a little traffic. The road she meant was my yard. I pointed to the survey stakes still visible from construction. That line marks the property boundary. She turned lips curling like she was explaining kindergarten math. I'm the HOA president, Mr. Bell. I know exactly where property lines are. My husband built this entire subdivision. Then she smiled, that sugar-coated venom smile. If you're smart, you'll stop making problems. People who fight the HOA tend to regret it. That was the day I realized the game wasn't about grass, it was about control, and Anna played dirty. The next week, she sent me my first HOA notice of violation. Apparently, my sprinklers were creating neighborhood disturbances. Translation: she didn't like that I was standing my ground. I laughed until I saw the fine, $250 plus administrative fees. I tried appealing. The hearing was 3 board members, her friends. They smirked through the whole thing, pretending to take notes while Anna lectured me about community standards. I left before I said something I'd regret. That night, Laura tried to calm me. She's not worth it, Sam, she whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she held her tea. Let karma deal with her. I smiled, but my mind was already at work. 30 years in electrical engineering teaches you one thing: every current needs grounding, and sometimes you have to be that ground. So the next morning, I started my quiet counterattack. At Tony's Hardware, a local shop where every Maple Ridge homeowner went to vent about HOA nonsense, I bought 8 motion-activated floodlights, a few yards of low-voltage wire, and a handful of metal stakes. Nothing illegal. Nothing that even required a permit. Tony raised an eyebrow. Problem neighbor, something like that, I said. She keeps driving across my lawn. He grinned. Then let there be light. By Saturday, my property line glowed like a runway. Each light triggered when something bigger than a cat crossed the threshold. I spent hours perfecting the wiring, waterproof junctions, code-compliant connectors, buried cables. It was the kind of meticulous work that reminded me who I was. Not a man she could bully, but a craftsman who built things to last. Monday morning, 7:47 sharp. The familiar roar of her engine, then boom. Every light exploded into life, blasting her windshield with 8,000 lumens of pure justice. She hit the brakes so hard I heard the ABS squeal from my kitchen. For 30 seconds, she sat frozen, blinded by the artificial sunrise I'd engineered. Then she gunned it anyway, tires flinging clumps of my lawn in all directions. Tuesday, same time, same show. This time she leaned on her horn like a woman possessed. Curtains twitched, neighbors peeked. The street had a new morning entertainment, Karen versus physics. By Wednesday, I'd added a sign, "Smile, you're on camera." Thursday night, my cameras caught something even better. Anna in all-black spy gear sneaking onto my lawn with a flashlight and steel-toed boots. She kicked, stomped, and yanked wires, like she was exorcising demons. What she didn't know was that my system had a backup battery. While she thought she was killing the power, she was actually starring in 1080p high definition. I spent the rest of the night sipping coffee, watching her tantrum from the live feed. The next morning, my mailbox held a fresh HOA complaint signed Anna Edwards, President, violation excessive lighting, disturbing community tranquility. I laughed so hard, I nearly spilled my coffee, but when Laura saw the video of Anna's destruction, she didn't laugh. She's going to keep pushing Sam. She won't stop until she wins. I know, I said quietly. That's why I'm changing the game. That weekend, the insurance adjuster came by to assess the vandalism. Midway through his inspection, he frowned. "Mr. Bell, these survey markers look off. You sure this is where your line ends?" "What do you mean?" I asked. He pulled out a laser measurer. "According to the subdivision plat, your property might extend a good 15 feet further than these markers show." 15 feet. That was nearly the entire corner, Anna claimed as her right-of-way. I felt that familiar electric buzz in my chest, the one I used to get when a big job went perfectly. "Can you note that in your report? Already done?" he said. "But if I were you, I'd get a professional survey. This looks fishy." When he left, I stared at the dirt, at the crushed grass, at the faint tire tracks that had mocked me for months. 15 extra feet. That meant every morning for 3 straight months, Anna hadn't been cutting across a shared corner. She'd been committing criminal trespass on land that was legally mine. That night, I barely slept. The same phrase echoed in my head like a generator hum. "She's been driving on your property." By dawn, I had a plan. Step 1, confirm the boundary. Step 2, lock it down literally. If Anna wanted to test whose ground this was, I'd give her an education in concrete physics. But first, I needed proof. Monday morning, I called my old buddy Peter Hall, a retired surveyor who now freelanced for union members. "Pete, it's Sam Bell. You still got that fancy laser rig," he chuckled. "You finally building that dream workshop?" "Not exactly. I think someone moved my property line." The line went quiet. Then he said, "I'll be there tomorrow." By Tuesday afternoon, Peter's crew had orange flags fluttering across my corner. The new line stretched 18 feet beyond where the old stakes sat straight through the patch Anna had flattened daily. When I saw it, I felt something deep settle inside me. Vindication. Peter pointed toward Anna's ornate retaining wall. "See that stonework, 4 feet onto your land. Illegal as hell." I smiled. "Then I guess we'll be neighbors in court soon." That evening, Anna marched over in her heels, red-faced and trembling. "You think you can just move property lines? My husband built this neighborhood." I held up Peter's signed report. "Guess he forgot to follow the map." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Mr. Bell. People like me make people like you disappear." I met her gaze calm and steady. "Lady, I've spent my whole life wiring systems that can handle lightning. You're just static." She spun on her heel and stormed off. And that was when I knew the real fun was about to begin. By the time the sun rose over Maple Ridge the next morning, my mind was set in concrete, literally and figuratively. For months, Anna Edwards had treated my lawn like her personal driveway. But now, with Peter's survey in my hands, I wasn't just angry. I was armed. I spent breakfast going over the numbers again, measuring distances with the precision of a man who'd spent his life working to thousandths of an inch, 18 feet. That's how far her SUV had been trespassing every single day, right through what was legally my property. Laura looked up from her tea, her voice soft but worried. "You're really going to fight her, aren't you, Laura?" I said, meeting her tired eyes. She picked the wrong guy to bully. That morning I returned to Tony's hardware with a grin that could cut glass. "Back again?" Sam Tony asked. "Let me guess, Karen still thinks your lawn's a freeway." "Worse," I said. "Turns out she's been stealing land too. So now I'm upgrading the defense system." Tony leaned on the counter. "You thinking cameras?" I shook my head. "Concrete." He let out a low whistle. "Oh boy. You're going full engineer on her. You bet your voltage meter I am. I ordered materials that would make any commercial contractor proud. Steel rebar, 40 pounds per square inches, quickset mix, form tubes, rated for highway posts. I even threw in decorative granite caps just to keep it aesthetic." Tony chuckled. "If she crashes into that, she'll bounce into next week." But before I poured an ounce of concrete, I made sure every detail was bulletproof. I drove downtown to the county building department. asked for the zoning and residential safety officer, and showed him my blueprints. The man studied the drawings, adjusted his glasses, and nodded. Decorative bollard under 4 feet high, inside property boundary, properly marked, no permit needed. Looks legal to me. Perfect, I said, filing that document right next to Peter's survey in a weatherproof folder labeled Evidence. Then came the installation. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of crisp Colorado air that smells like pine and dust. I laid out the measurements, marking the precise line where Anna's BMW cut across the corner. Using Peter's laser level, I positioned the form tube exactly 8 inches inside my property line. Not 1 inch more, not 1 inch less. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, wandered over with his coffee. "What are you building, Sam?" "A flagpole," I smirked. "A monument to boundary awareness." He raised a brow, then chuckled. "Wish I'd thought of that when the HOA fined me for painting my shutters." By noon, the hole was dug 5 feet deep below the frost line, reinforced with 4 steel bars tied with wire. I mixed the concrete myself, the thick gray slurry swirling like liquid stone. As I poured it in, I thought of all the times Anna had driven by with that smug little wave pretending not to see me. This was my answer. A solid, immovable, permanent answer. The bollard stood 42 inches tall when finished, smooth, round, and capped with polished granite. It looked harmless, even elegant. I added a bronze plaque that read Bell Garden Corner, established 2025. To the casual eye, it was a nice bit of landscaping. To anyone driving across my land at 25 miles per hour, it was a masterclass in physics. While the concrete cured, I repositioned my security cameras for a full panoramic shot. One aimed at the street corner, another covering the lawn, both feeding to a cloud server. I also called Rachel Kim, the attorney, letting her know everything was by the book. "If she hits it," Rachel said over the phone, "she's liable for her own damage." "You'll be fine. That's the plan," I replied. 3 days later, the stage was set. Monday morning, 7:47 a.m., just like clockwork. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching through the blinds. Anna's white SUV came roaring down the curve, sun glinting off its chrome like arrogance in motion. Her tires bit into the corner, aiming for that familiar shortcut. Then physics took the wheel. Crunch. The sound was magnificent, metal shrieking, rubber exploding, the deep, satisfying thud of unstoppable force meeting immovable object. The bollard didn't move an inch. Anna's BMW, however, folded like a tin can. The right front wheel buckled inward, the bumper shattered, and her luxury SUV came to a smoking halt in my grass. Steam hissed from the radiator. I sipped my coffee. She stumbled out, half in disbelief, half in fury. You did this on proposed morning, Mrs. Edwards," I said, stepping outside. "You're up early. How's the shortcut working today?" Her face turned crimson. "That's entrapment. I'll have you arrested." "For what? Landscaping legally on my property?" I held up Peter's survey and the zoning approval letter. "You might want to show your insurance this before you start yelling." Anna called the police anyway. 20 minutes later, Officer Rodriguez arrived, a stocky man with a look of perpetual exhaustion. He walked the site, measured the distance between the bollard and the street, then sighed. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "this post is entirely on Mr. Bell's property. You were driving off-road. That's private land." "But he trapped me," she sputtered. "Ma'am, you hit a stationary object. That's on you." When the tow truck arrived, Anna stood there, shaking mascara streaking down her face. She hissed, "You'll regret this, you pathetic handyman. I'll ruin you." "Funny," I said. "You already tried that." "Didn't take." As the truck hauled her mangled BMW away, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered across the street. They clapped quietly at first, then louder like an audience, watching the villain finally trip over her own arrogance. That night, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors I'd barely spoken to. "Sam, you're a legend." Finally, someone stood up to her. "Can you help me check my property line?" Laura laughed for the first time in weeks. "You started a movement, you know." Maybe I said, smiling at her. Or maybe I just built the world's most satisfying speed bump. But deep down, I knew Anna wouldn't stop there. Her pride was stronger than logic. And when people like her lose control, they don't admit defeat, they escalate. The next morning, a bright yellow envelope from the HOA appeared in my mailbox. Notice of violation. Unapproved structure penalty, $1,000 fine. I chuckled, took a sip of coffee, and whispered to myself, game on Karen. I wasn't going anywhere. And neither was that bollard. The next few days felt like living inside a bad sitcom written by lawyers and lunatics. I woke up every morning to a new notice of violation in my mailbox. Each one stamped with that cheap gold HOA seal that Anna must have ordered in bulk. Unapproved structure. excessive lighting, unauthorized use of landscaping materials. She was practically speedrunning the HOA handbook, desperate to find something that would stick. On Wednesday, she upped her game. A white city truck rolled into my driveway just after breakfast engine idling like it was there on official business. A man climbed out with a clipboard reflective vest and the weary expression of someone who'd been bribed with more than coffee. "Mr. Bell," he said. "Code enforcement. Anonymous complaint. Possible unpermitted electrical installations on private property." Anonymous my ass. I could practically smell Anna's perfume on his paperwork. "Unpermitted electrical work," I asked, gesturing toward my lawn lights. "They're low voltage, under 30 volts. No permit required under county code." He didn't look convinced. "We'll see about that." He started snapping photos, measuring, muttering to himself. I'd seen that routine before. Guys like him worked for whoever signed the biggest check. I'd been on job sites where inspectors found issues right before a developer's bid came through. It wasn't about safety. It was about leverage. When he finished, he handed me a carbon copy of the citation, $1,200 fine, 10 days, to remove all electrical fixtures or face escalating penalties. He said, "You can appeal, but it rarely goes anywhere." "I'm not appealing," I said, taking the paper calmly. "I'm documenting." After he left, I sat at my workbench staring at the citation. I could almost hear Anna giggling in her marble kitchen, bragging to her friends about putting the old electrician in his place. She had no idea how many walls she'd just opened for me. That night I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Big Jim, my old foreman back from my union days, gruff voice, 40 years of experience, and a Rolodex thicker than a phone book. "Jim," I said, "you ever hear of a code inspector named Ethan Cole?" He snorted. "Cole, oh yeah. The golf buddy of half the developers in Jefferson County. Word is he's been signing off on projects that couldn't pass kindergarten math. Think he works with Greg Edwards' kid in this town. Everyone with dirty boots and a clipboard works with Edwards. What's he trying to do to you? Shake me down with bogus fines." Jim chuckled darkly. "Document everything. And check the city's online database for inspection histories. You might find something juicy." The second call was to Rachel Kim, my attorney. When I explained the new fine, she laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. "They're panicking," she said. "They know the property line issue is real. They're trying to discredit you before it snowballs." "I'm not backing down," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm drafting something better than a complaint. I'm filing a preliminary injunction against the HOA for harassment and property interference. You'll get your piece and interest." Thursday morning, I drove to the city clerk's office. The place smelled like toner coffee and bureaucratic regret. I filled out a Freedom of Information request for every code enforcement complaint submitted in the last 18 months. The clerk raised an eyebrow, but printed them anyway, 57 pages of scanned documents, each stamped filed by A. Edwards. As I flipped through them, I saw names I recognized: Mrs. Brooks, fined for bird feeders. The Hendersons flagged for unauthorized driveway extension. The Martinez family painted their fence the wrong shade of beige. It was like reading a list of everyone who'd ever annoyed Anna. Each complaint led to fines, then construction contracts, handled by who else? Edwards Development. It wasn't an HOA, it was a racket. That night I took my findings to Tony's Hardware, where the smell of motor oil and sawdust was as comforting as Sunday church. A few neighbors were already there: Evelyn Brooks with her spiral notebook, the Hendersons clutching a folder of fines, the Garcias with photos of their newly adjusted property stakes. We spread everything across the counter like detectives solving a small-town crime. "Look at this," I said, pointing at a pattern of complaint dates. Every one of these happened within 2 weeks of an Edwards construction permit. She finds them, her husband helps them fix it, and then bills the HOA. Tony whistled low. "That's fraud with extra steps. And now she's using city inspectors to do her dirty work," I said. But not for long. Evelyn adjusted her glasses. "You're gathering evidence, aren't you?" "More than that," I said. "I'm building a case and a community." By Friday, I had a stack of labeled folders thicker than a courtroom brief: surveys, original verses, edited HOA violations, fraud pattern code enforcement, collusion video evidence, trespass, and vandalism. I uploaded everything to a cloud drive, shared it with Rachel, and made encrypted backups. I'd been an electrician long enough to know always have redundancy. That evening, as Laura and I ate dinner, headlights swept across our window. A black SUV idled out, front engine running. No one got out. After a few minutes it drove away. Laura set down her fork. "Sam, was that her?" "Probably," I said quietly. "She's trying to scare me." "Does it?" I smiled faintly. only makes me pour stronger concrete. Saturday morning I woke up to find my mailbox knocked over and tire tracks leading back toward Anna's house. The post was bent clean in half. She wanted a reaction. Instead, I installed a new one made of steel anchored in 200 pounds of quickset concrete. And just for style I stenciled Mailbox 2, 0, HOA complaint resistant in red paint across the side. By noon, neighbors were laughing, taking photos. Even the mailman gave me a thumbs up. That same afternoon, I got an email from Rachel's subject, re-HOA harassment case city attorney's office has accepted preliminary review. Inspector Cole is under internal audit due to multiple irregular permits connected to Edwards development. Sit tight, Sam. The dominoes are starting to fall. That night I couldn't sleep. The wind outside whispered through the pine trees, and every creak in the house felt like anticipation before a storm. Anna had the power of the HOA. Greg had money and influence. But I had truth and the patience of a man who'd spent 3 decades testing circuits until every connection worked perfectly. Sunday morning, I looked out the window at my lawn. The new grass was pushing up through the tire scars, the sprinkler heads gleaming under early sunlight. My concrete bollard stood firm, untouched, a monument to stubbornness and precision. I knew Anna wasn't done. She'd lost face, lost her car, and now her little empire was cracking. Pride like hers doesn't crumble quietly, it explodes. I took a sip of my coffee, set down the mug, and whispered, "Your move, Karen." Because I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was preparing for war. Monday morning came wrapped in that kind of uneasy calm that always shows up before a storm, the kind of silence that makes birds stop singing. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching sunlight slide across my concrete bollard like a spotlight on a stage. For a brief moment, I almost believed the war was over. Then I saw the envelope. Bright yellow taped to my front door in angry, uneven handwriting. Remove all illegal structures or face legal action. HOA President Anna Edwards. I laughed out loud. It wasn't the first threat I'd received, but it was the most desperate-looking one yet. Anna's power was slipping, and she knew it. I took the letter inside, laid it neatly on my workbench, and opened my laptop. I started compiling everything: photos, dates, property surveys, video footage, every HOA notice. Rachel Kim had told me to stay methodical. Courts love timelines, she said. Narratives backed by evidence win cases. She wasn't wrong. By mid-morning, I had a 20-page report ready to send to her, complete with footnotes and hyperlinks. As an electrician, I'd always believed that clean wiring was half the battle. Legal work, it turned out, wasn't much different. It was just about organizing current through chaos. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Sam," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "You sitting down, I'm standing," I replied. "Good, because this is going to make you want to hit something." I got word from the county records office. Multiple surveys across Maple Ridge have been altered, not just yours. 6 properties show boundary extensions signed by Greg Edwards personally. I exhaled slowly. So it's not just me. No, you're part of a pattern. And guess what? Every single altered plat benefits the Edwards corner lots, or their so-called green buffer zones. We're talking systematic fraud. For a few seconds, I just stared at the wall. Years of installing wiring taught me to look for patterns: current flow, circuit integrity, but this pattern was uglier than anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't just greed. It was control disguised as regulation. Rachel continued, "I've reached out to a city surveyor named Thomas. He's willing to verify the original plats against the altered ones. If we can prove Greg manipulated those records, we'll have grounds for both civil and criminal charges. Let me know when he's ready," I said. "I'll bring coffee." After we hung up, I went outside to check my mail. My neighbors were already out: the Hendersons, the Garcias, and old Mrs. Brooks, each clutching their own HOA notices like war trophies. "She's gone crazy," Mrs. Brooks said, shaking her head. "She fined me $150 for having wind chimes." "Wind chimes, Sam?" Mr. Henderson held up his paper. "Ours says our mailbox is the wrong color. We didn't even paint it." The Garcias' teenage son scrolled through his phone. "My dad's got video of her walking around with a clipboard taking pictures of every house at 6 a.m. That was when I realized Anna wasn't just fighting me. She was tightening her grip on everyone. "Come by Tony's Hardware tonight," I said. "Bring your papers. All of them." That evening, the little hardware store looked more like a war room. The smell of motor oil mixed with burnt coffee and righteous fury. We spread documents across the counter: letters, fines, photos, timestamps. Every page told the same story: Anna abusing her HOA power to funnel money and control through her husband's construction company. Tony leaned back on his stool. She's been bleeding this community for years. You're the first one who actually fought back. Yeah, I said quietly. And now we've got proof. Mrs. Brooks pulled out a worn leather notebook and flipped it open. I've been keeping track since 2022. Every time she finds someone, Greg's trucks showed up a week later for repairs. Always the same workers. Always cash payments. Rachel joined via video call, her voice echoing through Tony's shop speakers. Perfect. Keep every record. I'll file a joint action. The county already suspects misconduct, and your testimonies will seal it. While everyone spoke, I caught a flicker of movement through the window headlights parked across the street. A white SUV. Even from that distance, I knew the shape by heart. She's watching us, I murmured. Tony followed my gaze, cracked his knuckles. Let her watch. She's about to see what happens when the neighborhood unites. That night as I drove home, snow began to fall. The streets glowed under street lamps and the air smelled sharp electric. My bollard stood like a sentinel in the corner, a silent reminder that some things once set in concrete can't be moved. But the next morning I discovered Anna had escalated again. A brand new HOA bulletin had been pinned to every mailbox in the neighborhood. It read like propaganda from a dictator community alert. Residents are reminded that unauthorized meetings and vigilante behavior violate HOA bylaws. Spreading misinformation about the board or its members will result in fines and legal consequences. All neighborhood improvements must be approved through HOA channels. Signed, of course, Anna Edwards, President. Underneath, someone had scribbled in marker, "Go to hell, Karen." By noon, half the neighborhood was buzzing. People whispered in driveways, swapping screenshots and HOA letters like battlefield intel. I could feel the shift fear was turning into resistance. That afternoon, Rachel called again. "Sam, you're going to love this. I just received confirmation from the county assessor's office. Greg's development company submitted altered plats under a fraudulent notary seal. It's enough for a criminal investigation. I'm sending it to the district attorney's office now." I smiled slowly. "So the fuse is lit." "Yep," she said. "Now we wait for it to blow." But Anna didn't know any of that yet. She came storming up my driveway that evening, wrapped in her overpriced coat heels, sinking into the soft winter soil. "You think you've won Mr. Bell," she snarled. "You think your little concrete post makes you untouchable." I didn't even bother standing up from my porch chair. "Untouchable, no. Documented, yes." Her nostrils flared. "My husband's friends run this town. You're finished." "Funny," I said, sipping my coffee, "because I just spoke to the county attorney. They'd love to hear how your friends managed to sign those fake surveys." For a moment, her mask slipped. Just a flicker, fear, or maybe realization. Then she turned, marched back toward her house, and shouted over her shoulder, "This isn't over." She was right. It wasn't. The following day, news spread that Greg's company was under investigation. Inspectors swarmed one of his construction sites, halting work on a luxury townhouse project. Word around town was that someone had tipped off the feds. And as if karma hadn't had enough fun yet, the same day, a heavy snowstorm rolled through Jefferson County. Freezing rain, high winds, the kind that knocks out power lines. When the lights went out that night, my house stayed bright. My low-voltage system switched seamlessly to backup battery, powering everything from cameras to floodlights. Across the street, Anna's McMansion sat in total darkness. For hours, she sat in her driveway, trapped behind her electronic gate, frozen shut by ice. The irony was almost poetic. I stood at my window, watching her silhouette pacing under the moonlight, phone pressed to her ear, no doubt calling every contact she had. But nobody came. Because when you build your empire on other people's land, it only takes one storm to wash it all away. That night, Laura smiled from the couch, wrapped in a blanket. "Looks like your concrete post survived the blizzard." "Better than her reputation," I said softly. By morning, my phone was full of messages. Neighbors thanking me. The DA's office confirming receipt of Rachel's evidence. And one anonymous text that simply read, "She's losing everything." For the first time in months, I felt peace. But deep down, I knew one thing: Anna wasn't done fighting yet. She'd built her whole identity on control. And when people like that lose it, they don't fade quietly. They explode. And when she did, I'd be ready. The storm might have passed, but the real thunder was just beginning. For 3 blessed days, Maple Ridge Estates was calm. No HOA letters, no anonymous complaints, no BMW roaring across my corner. I thought maybe, just maybe, Anna had finally learned her lesson. Then, Friday morning came. The sound of diesel engines shattered the quiet. I stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in my hand, and there it was, a yellow excavator parked at the corner of my property. Its hydraulic arm hung low like a predator ready to strike. 2 men in orange vests stood beside it, one lighting a cigarette, the other pretending to study blueprints. And standing proudly in front of them wearing her signature pink wool coat and smug expression was Anna Edwards. My stomach went cold. I walked over calmly. "Morning, Anna. You planning on digging up tulips this time?" She turned with that smile, the kind only villains in bad soap operas have. "Oh, Mr. Bell. Emergency gas line repair. City ordered it. Safety issue, you understand." "Funny," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket because I called the gas company yesterday about a billing issue. They didn't mention any emergency repairs. The younger worker shuffled awkwardly. Ma'am, I thought this was waterline work." Anna shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "It's both, just get it done." That's when I started recording. The excavator's engine revved and its bucket began lowering toward my bollard, my beautiful concrete masterpiece. I raised my voice. "Hey, this is private property. You're trespassing. Put that machine in park right now," Anna laughed. Don't be so dramatic. It's routine maintenance. You wouldn't want to get fined again for interfering with city work, would you?" I called 911 on speaker. "Yes, this is Samuel Bell, Maple Ridge Estates. I've got an unmarked construction crew digging into my property claiming it's city work. No official vehicles, no permits, and my HOA president is supervising them." The operator's tone changed instantly. "Sir, stay where you are. Officers are en route." Anna froze for just a second, just long enough for me to see the flicker of panic. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing red and blue across the snow. Officer Rodriguez, the same one who handled the BMW incident, stepped out looking like he'd just aged 10 years since then. "Ma'am," he said, voice heavy with déjà vu, "do you have authorization for this excavation?" Anna straightened. "Of course, emergency utility maintenance." The gas company Rodriguez cut her off. "Already checked with them on the way here. They've got no scheduled work in this area. So, unless you've suddenly started working for the city, you're in trouble." The excavator operator killed the engine. His hands were shaking. "Look, she paid me cash, said it was approved." "I didn't know." He fumbled for his phone, scrolling frantically. "She even texted me." Rodriguez took the phone, hit play on a voice message, and Anna's voice filled the air. "I don't care if it's illegal, just make it look like emergency utility work. Gas leak, water break, whatever. I'll handle the paperwork. Just make sure that ugly concrete thing disappears by Friday." You could have heard a pin drop. Rodriguez sighed. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for attempted property damage, impersonating a public contractor, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Anna's jaw dropped. "You can't do this to me. I'm the HOA president." Rodriguez didn't even blink. "Then you'll have plenty of time to hold board meetings in county jail." As he read, her rights neighbors started gathering phones out, recording. Evelyn Brooks whispered, "About damn time," as Anna was handcuffed beside the frozen ditch she'd ordered dug. The excavator guy was questioned and released with a warning, but not before giving Rodriguez everything: texts, call logs, bank transfers. Every shred of proof tied straight back to her. And because karma has a wicked sense of humor, one of those transfers led directly to Greg Edwards. Turns out Greg had provided the fake utility company letterhead Anna used to hire the crew. That night, Denver's Channel 8 ran the headline, "HOA President Arrested in Fraudulent Construction Scheme Property Line Scandal Expands." The report showed aerial drone shots of my yard, the concrete bollard gleaming like a monument, Anna being escorted to a squad car, and me standing there holding a coffee mug that read "World's Most Patient Electrician." Rachel called me right after it aired. "You're viral," she said, half laughing, half stunned. "I've got 3 law firms offering pro bono assistance just to be part of this case. The DA's office wants your permission to include your footage in their press release." "Tell them to go ahead," I said. "Let everyone see what happens when HOA power meets physics." For a brief moment, I thought that was the end. But as anyone who's dealt with entitled people knows, they never go quietly. 2 days later, while Anna sat in jail awaiting arraignment, Greg decided to make his grand move. He showed up at my door in a black overcoat, eyes, sunken voice tight with rage. "You think you've won. You ruined my wife's reputation. You've destroyed my business." "No," I said evenly. "You both did that all by yourselves." He took a step forward, finger pointing at my chest. "You have no idea who you're messing with. I built this neighborhood. I can bury you under it." I didn't move. "Greg, if I had $1 for every guy who's threatened to bury me, I'd own half your fraudulent property lines." His face went crimson. "You'll regret this." "I already regret talking to you," I said, and shut the door in his face. Rachel advised me to file a restraining order. The judge granted it the same day, citing credible threat of retaliation. But I knew Greg wouldn't risk another direct confrontation. People like him prefer doing their damage in the shadows. And right on cue, 3 days later, an anonymous complaint hit the city again, claiming my bollard obstructed public safety access. The city inspector assigned to the case, none other than Ethan Cole, the same crooked official from before. But this time the tables had turned. When Cole arrived, he looked nervous. He paced the corner, measured distances, scribbled notes, all while avoiding eye contact. Finally, he sighed. "Mr. Bell, I'm just doing my job." "Really?" I said, crossing my arms. "Because the last time you did your job, you signed off on illegal surveys for the Edwards family." His face twitched. "You can't prove that." "Oh, I can," I said, pulling out my phone. "The DA's office subpoenaed those records last week. They've got your signature on at least 6 falsified plats. You might want to call a lawyer before you finish writing that report." He froze, pen midair. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Try me." He left 10 minutes later, report unsigned, shoulders slumped like a man watching his career evaporate. That evening, Rachel called again, her tone practically glowing. "The city just suspended Inspector Cole. He's under investigation for bribery and falsification of records. Greg's company is next." It was happening, one domino at a time. Over the next week, the story exploded. Local reporters uncovered that Greg's company had forged at least 9 property maps, stealing over half an acre of land across 3 neighborhoods. Anna's arrest triggered a full audit of the HOA, revealing slush funds, misused maintenance fees, and even fake contractor invoices paid directly to Edwards Development. The city council scheduled a public hearing, and for once the people of Maple Ridge showed up. Every seat filled residents holding their fines, their complaint letters, their anger. When the chairman asked if anyone wished to speak, Evelyn Brooks stood first. "This man," she said, pointing toward me, "was the first to fight back. The rest of us were too scared. We owe him more than we can say." Applause filled the chamber. I didn't expect it, didn't even want it. But for the first time in months, I realized something profound. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. By the end of that night, the council voted to suspend the HOA's authority pending investigation, froze its accounts, and placed Maple Ridge Estates under temporary city management. Greg Edwards was indicted for fraud and conspiracy. And as for Anna, the next morning the Denver Post headline said it all: HOA Queen Falls president charged with fraud, vandalism, and bribery, community rebels. I framed that one. Because no matter what came next, court hearings, cleanup, legal paperwork, I'd already built the one thing Anna could never destroy: a community strong enough to fight back. By the time winter loosened its grip on Colorado, Maple Ridge Estates looked like a different world. The snow had melted, the lawns were waking up green again, and the only thing colder than the air was the silence around the Edwards mansion. Their luxury SUV was gone, replaced by a "for sale, pending federal review" sign. But if I'd learned anything from Anna and Greg, it's that arrogance doesn't just die quietly, it decomposes loudly, like something toxic left in the sun. The criminal case was unfolding faster than even Rachel predicted. The district attorney had assembled a task force: property fraud investigators, financial auditors, and a federal agent named Patricia Rodriguez, who carried herself with the kind of calm authority that makes liars twitch. She'd been quietly tracking Greg's projects for years, suspecting corruption in his construction bids and HOA ties. My case apparently was the missing piece that tied everything together. When she visited my home for the first time, she glanced at the concrete bollard and smiled faintly. "So this is the landmark that started a federal investigation." I laughed. "Guess I built something that really stood the test of time." She pulled out a notepad. "You'd be surprised how often that happens. The big ones always crumble over something small: a receipt, a missing permit, or a pissed-off electrician who refuses to move his property line." We spent hours going over the evidence, the fake surveys, HOA fines recordings, even Anna's voice message about making it look like emergency utility work. Agent Rodriguez was methodical. She asked for timestamps, metadata, even model numbers from my cameras. By the end of the day, she looked satisfied. "This case," she said, "is going to set a precedent. HOA abuse, developer collusion, local government bribery, all of it in one file." Meanwhile, my life had turned into a community help desk. Neighbors stopped by with questions about deeds, survey boundaries, and how to document HOA harassment properly. The irony wasn't lost on me. A retired electrician turned into the neighborhood's property rights guru. One night, Tony Ramirez dropped by with pizza and a stack of printouts. "You're on Reddit, Sam," he said, grinning like he discovered buried treasure. "Reddit," I blinked. "Yeah. There's a whole thread called 'Electrician Outsmarts HOA Karen with Concrete Justice.' It's gone viral." Laura laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. "Congratulations, dear. You're an internet folk hero." The next morning my inbox proved it. Dozens of emails poured in from people all over the country, some sharing their own HOA horror stories, others just writing to say thank you. One message stood out: Mr. Bell, your story gave me the courage to fight my HOA after they fined me for planting a memorial tree for my late husband. I won. Thank you for reminding me that homeowners still have rights. Reading that, I realized something I hadn't before my fight with Anna wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a lesson that rippled far beyond Maple Ridge. But even as the town celebrated, the legal storm was far from over. Greg's lawyers were doing everything they could to muddy the waters. They filed motion after motion, claiming the surveys were clerical errors, that Anna's arrest was politically motivated, that I had entrapped her with the bollard. It was desperation wrapped in expensive suits. Rachel stayed 3 steps ahead of them. Her office looked like a war bunker: boxes labeled evidence, HOA fraud printouts from city servers, notarized transcripts of every inspection report Cole had ever touched. They're trying to drown us in paper, she said, rubbing her temples. But what they don't realize is I swim better than they do. We prepped for the upcoming city council hearing, where both the HOA's future and the Edwards contracts would be publicly debated. Rachel wanted me to testify, to explain how it all began: the tire tracks, the signs, the floodlights, the concrete. Just tell it like you lived it, she said. No theatrics. The truth's damning enough. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, watching frost form along the edges of my bollard, remembering how this all started: one SUV cutting a shortcut through my grass. Laura came out wrapped in a blanket. You nervous? Not exactly, I said. Just thinking about how many people had to be stepped on before this finally blew open. She smiled softly. Then make sure you step on the right ones tomorrow. The next morning, the council hall overflowed. Reporters lined the walls, microphones pointed at the stage. 3 TV stations were live. And right there, sitting in the front row, was Anna, her trademark smugness gone, replaced by the brittle stillness of someone clinging to the last fragments of denial. Greg sat beside her, jaw tight, whispering to his attorney. When my name was called, I walked to the podium. The murmurs quieted. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me. My name is Samuel Bell, I began. I'm a retired electrician. I moved to Maple Ridge because I wanted peace, not politics. But peace doesn't last long when your HOA president thinks private property is a suggestion. The crowd chuckled softly, and I continued. I told them everything: the months of harassment, the fake fines, the vandalism, the bogus inspector, the forged surveys, the arrest. Every word backed by evidence projected on a screen behind me. When the video of Anna ordering the excavator played, the entire room gasped. Then Rachel stood up to present the forensic overlays from the county original plats versus the falsified ones. The difference was staggering: nearly half an acre of stolen land across 6 properties. Councilwoman Gonzalez turned to Anna. Mrs. Edwards, do you deny signing these documents? Anna's voice cracked. I didn't. I only followed my husband's advice. Greg slammed his hand on the table. Watch your mouth, Anna. The microphones caught it perfectly. The chairman banged his gavel for silence. That will be enough. The evidence is overwhelming. The HOA board is hereby dissolved pending federal outcome. Control of community funds and enforcement authority will revert to the city until new elections can be held. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Anna's lawyer buried his face in his hands. As the hearing adjourned, Agent Rodriguez approached me with a rare smile. You did good, Mr. Bell. You built more than a case, you built a blueprint for how to stop these people. I just poured some concrete and refused to move, I said. Exactly, she replied. And sometimes that's all it takes. Over the next few weeks, everything unraveled for the Edwards family. Greg was indicted on 12 counts of fraud, bribery, and falsification of public records. Anna faced charges of vandalism, impersonating a public official, and conspiracy. Inspector Cole flipped on them, both trading testimony for leniency. By March, the HOA's accounts were frozen, and restitution funds were being distributed back to the homeowners. Evelyn Brooks got her bird feeders reinstated with a written apology. The Hendersons' driveway fine was refunded with interest. And the Garcias used their settlement to rebuild their backyard garden, the one Greg's crew had stolen. One afternoon, the neighborhood gathered around my corner for a barbecue, not a board meeting, not an HOA vote, just real community. Kids rode bikes down the street, dogs barked, someone played country music from a speaker. Mrs. Brooks raised her lemonade in a toast. To Sam Bell, the man who proved that concrete's stronger than corruption. Everyone laughed and clinked cups. I looked around, taking it all in: the laughter, the smell of burgers, the feeling of peace finally restored. Laura squeezed my hand. You did it, she whispered. I shook my head. We did it. Because that's what it really was. Not one man's revenge, but a neighborhood's redemption. And as the sun dipped behind the Rockies, its light catching on the granite cap of my now famous bollard, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally poured something that would last longer than concrete. Spring brought the kind of calm that felt almost unnatural. After months of sirens, reporters, and HOA chaos, the streets of Maple Ridge were suddenly quiet. Birds sang again. Lawns grew freely. Neighbors waved to each other without fear of a fine appearing in their mailbox the next morning. But underneath that calm, something still simmered. Greg Edwards might have been indicted, but he hadn't gone down quietly. While Anna sat under house arrest awaiting trial, Greg had been busy behind the scenes calling old friends, greasing palms, and whispering rumors that I'd set him up with doctored evidence. I didn't pay much attention at first. The man was drowning. I figured he'd flail before he sank. But one Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Rachel. Her tone was colder than usual. "Sam," she said, "we've got a problem." I leaned against the porch railing. "What kind of problem? Greg's lawyer just filed a civil countersuit against you personally." I laughed out loud. "For what, owning my own land too effectively?" Rachel sighed. "They're claiming defamation, intentional interference with business, and emotional distress. They're demanding damages of $2 million. I blinked. "You've got to be kidding." "I wish I was," she said. "It's a scare tactic. They know they'll lose criminally, so they're trying to bury you in civil court." For a moment, I said nothing. The mountain breeze rustled through the trees, and I stared at my concrete bollard, that stubborn monument to everything Greg hated about me. "Let them try," I said finally. "I've got receipts, video timestamps, and half the county on my side." Rachel smiled faintly. That's what I told them in my response. 2 days later, the local paper picked it up. Developer Greg Edwards countersues concrete man for defamation. It sounded ridiculous even in print, but it stirred things up. Reporters were back on my lawn, shoving microphones in my face, asking if I regretted escalating things. I didn't. Not one bit. Still, Greg's move rattled some neighbors. Fear had a way of creeping back when lawyers got involved. The Hendersons worried their HOA refunds would vanish in legal limbo. The Garcias fretted over retaliation. And old Mrs. Brooks, bless her heart, started leaving handwritten notes in my mailbox. "Don't let the snakes win, Sam." But Rachel wasn't the only ally I had. Agent Rodriguez was still watching the Edwards case, and one evening she called me personally. "I heard about the countersuit," she said. "Typical Greg move. But don't worry, we're not done with him yet." "What do you mean?" "We found offshore accounts linked to his construction company. He's been moving HOA funds and kickbacks through shell corporations for years. Once we freeze those, he won't have $2 to rub together, much less $2 million to sue you with." I grinned. Guess karma pays on time after all. Meanwhile, Anna had turned into Maple Ridge's most awkward ghost. Her once manicured lawn had gone wild, and her luxury SUV sat flat-tired in the driveway like a monument to bad decisions. She couldn't leave town due to her bail conditions, so she spent her days pacing behind drawn curtains. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her through the blinds, staring at the concrete post like it was mocking her. One morning, a new letter appeared in my mailbox. Handwritten, no HOA seal this time. "Mr. Bell, you've ruined my life. Everyone hates me. My husband blames me for everything. I hope you're happy. Anna Edwards." I folded the letter carefully, then filed it with the others. Not out of spite, but because I knew it might matter later. You learn in both wiring and warfare, document everything. By May, Greg's trial date was set, and the tension in Maple Ridge could have been cut with a shovel. The city council had turned the old HOA office into a community legal resource center. Rachel volunteered there twice a week, teaching homeowners how to read plat maps and file records requests. She called it the Bell Initiative. I told her that sounded way too heroic, but she ignored me. The best part, the city had officially renamed the street corner where Anna's car had met its concrete destiny. The new sign read Bell Corner Way. Even the mailman laughed every time he passed it. But Greg's final act was still ahead, one last desperate stunt before his empire completely imploded. It happened on a warm Friday evening in June. I was grilling steaks on the back deck when I heard a loud crack. Like wood splitting. Laura peeked out the window. "Sam, what was that?" I stepped into the yard, heart thudding. The wooden fence at the back of my property had been smashed open. In the glow of my floodlights, I saw movement, 2 figures running toward the tree line. One of them stumbled, swore, and dropped something shiny. I sprinted over. It was a jerry can half full of gasoline. I froze. A sick chemical smell lingered in the air. Then I saw it, a small pile of rags soaked and smoldering near the edge of my garage. Without thinking, I grabbed the garden hose and doused it. Steam hissed up like a dying serpent. It hadn't fully caught, thank God, but it had been seconds away. When the police arrived, I handed them the gas can and the footage from my cameras. The infrared feed showed everything: 2 men sneaking onto my property, pouring fuel near the garage, then bolting when the motion lights came on. One of them was unmistakably Greg Edwards. He was arrested that night, charged with attempted arson, trespassing, and violation of court orders. The news hit Denver by morning: disgraced developer arrested in midnight attack on homeowner. It was over. Truly, finally over. The next week, Greg's lawyers withdrew the civil countersuit pending further developments. Translation: he was out of money, credibility, and friends. Anna, faced with her husband's new charges, agreed to a plea deal, full cooperation in exchange for leniency. Her testimony sealed his fate. When the verdict came down: 20 years in federal prison for Greg, 5 years probation and community service for Anna. Maple Ridge celebrated like it was the 4th of July. Fireworks, potluck dinners, music. Someone even hung a banner across the old HOA clubhouse that read, "No more Karens, no more crooks." Rachel and I sat on my porch watching kids ride bikes past, my bollard still standing tall, still unscathed. "You know," she said, sipping her drink, "you could have moved away months ago." "Started fresh." I shrugged. "This is fresh. We cleaned out the rot." She smiled. "You should write a book about this. About concrete, about justice that doesn't need to shout." That night, I walked to the corner and ran my hand along the granite cap of the post. The metal plaque still gleamed under the porch light: Bell Garden Corner, Est, 2025. What started as an act of frustration had become a landmark of defiance. People from nearby towns drove by just to see the concrete post that broke an HOA. And honestly, I didn't mind. If one stubborn piece of concrete could remind people that bullies, even those in suits and fancy titles, can be stopped, then it had done its job. As I turned to go back inside, Laura stood in the doorway, smiling softly. "You're finally at peace, aren't you?" I nodded. "Yeah. Took a while, but I think gravity and justice finally found common ground." The night was quiet again. Not the uneasy quiet from before, but the good kind, the kind that means the fight's over and the right side won. By late summer, Maple Ridge wasn't just calm, it was thriving. The same neighborhood once ruled by fines, fear, and fake smiles had turned into something alive again. Children rode their bikes through the streets Anna once patrolled with clipboards. Front yards bloomed wild with flowers that would have earned violations just a year earlier. The HOA signs were gone, replaced with new ones reading "Community-owned, no HOA, respect your neighbors." And right in the middle of it all, my concrete bollard stood like a silent sentinel. A reminder that one man's refusal to back down could change everything. Reporters came from as far as Chicago and Dallas to cover the story. They called it the Ballard Revolution. CNN even aired a segment about corrupt HOAs, opening with drone footage of my corner lot. It felt surreal seeing my little patch of grass and concrete beam across America. Agent Rodriguez called one afternoon to tell me the federal case was officially closed. Greg Edwards took a plea deal, she said. 18 years federal time restitution to the city and lifetime ban from contracting. Anna's serving her community hours in Denver cleaning parks, if you can believe it. I laughed. Guess she finally found a legitimate way to trim lawns. But the truth was, I didn't feel triumphant, I felt content. For the first time in years, my home felt like a home again. That peace carried through the neighborhood. We started hosting monthly barbecues. Tony organized a freedom fair where families sold crafts, baked goods, and told their own HOA horror stories at a booth labeled Neighborhood Therapy. Evelyn Brooks became the unofficial mayor of Maple Ridge, walking around with a clipboard, not to fine anyone, but to check who needed help repainting their fences or trimming trees. The city even honored me at a council ceremony, presenting a small plaque to Samuel Bell for defending homeownership and community integrity. I didn't say much in my speech, just that property rights aren't about dirt or grass, they're about dignity. The right to call something yours because you worked for it, cared for it, and refused to let someone steal it. But as with all endings, there was one more twist. 2 months after Greg's sentencing, I got a letter, a real one, not email, written in careful cursive. It was from Anna. "Mr. Bell, I wanted to hate you. For months, I blamed you for everything. But after what Greg did, after seeing what we turned into, I realized you were the only one who ever told me the truth. You didn't destroy my life. You stopped me from helping him destroy everyone else's. Thank you, Anna Edwards." I sat there a long while staring at that letter. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it proved something I'd almost forgotten. Even the worst people can wake up when the consequences finally hit. Laura found me on the porch, letter in hand. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said softly. "Just thinking about how fast power can rot people," she smiled. And how slow concrete sets, I chuckled. Guess both take patience. Life settled into something beautifully ordinary. I built a small tool shed near the back fence, my new project. Nothing fancy, just a place to tinker and help neighbors fix things. It became the unofficial community repair shop. Kids brought their bikes, Evelyn brought her old lawnmower, even the mailman stopped by to fix a squeaky cartwheel. Every so often someone new would drive by, roll down their window, and point to the granite-capped post. "Hey, you're the guy with the concrete story," I'd smile. "Yeah, that's me. Physics and patience, undefeated duo." But the real joy wasn't fame or headlines, it was watching Maple Ridge heal itself. When fall arrived, the leaves turned gold and red, blanketing the lawns that used to be battlegrounds. On Halloween, every porch light glowed. No HOA restrictions. Just laughter costumes and kids chasing candy wrappers down the street. As I watched them, Laura wrapped her arm around me. "You think they'll remember all this?" I looked at the old clubhouse, now converted into a community hall. Maybe not the details I said, but they'll remember that one time a neighborhood stood up and said, "No more." A month later, I got an email from Rachel's subject line, "Guess what made case law?" She'd forwarded the official summary from the Colorado Court of Appeals. My lawsuit and the city's fraud investigation had become a legal precedent, Bell v. Maple Ridge Estates HOA 2025, establishing homeowner protection against fraudulent annexation and HOA overreach. Reading that, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: pride, not anger. It wasn't just my victory anymore. It was a legal safeguard for thousands of people I'd never meet. Families, veterans, retirees, all now a little safer from the kind of arrogance that once drove a BMW across my lawn. That night, I took one last walk down the quiet street. Frost glittered on the grass. My floodlights hummed softly, the same ones that once made Anna furious. I paused by the bollard, brushing away a few fallen leaves. The plaque caught the moonlight, "Bell Corner," proof that justice has weight. I smiled. Justice did have weight, about 420 pounds of reinforced concrete and a lifetime of patience. Then I headed inside, shut off the lights, and finally let myself rest. When I look back on it all, it's not the lawsuits or the headlines that matter, it's the lesson buried under the concrete. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about anger, it's about principle. You don't need wealth or power to fight corruption, just truth, persistence, and the courage to document every inch of what's rightfully yours. The HOA thought they could rewrite my property lines the way they rewrote rules, but what they forgot is that character has boundaries too. Once you let someone cross them, they'll never stop until you stop them. If this story made you feel something, anger, pride, or even a spark of hope, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, tell me your own HOA nightmare, or just say hi. Because every story matters. And if you believe ordinary people can still win against bullies with titles and fake authority, hit subscribe. Stick around. There are more battles, more lessons, and more stories of justice worth hearing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying something, it's building something that lasts.